All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Palmer, the Executive Director of the Travel and Tourism Research Association. Welcome to today's webinar, Monitoring Visitor Satisfaction at Scale, the Power of Rating and Reviews Data, presented by our TTRA partner, Rove. TTRA unites university academics, professional practitioners, and research experts, the best and the brightest from the travel and tourism research community. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join us. Recent graduates will get their first year free. You can learn more at ttra.com. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit the TTRA website for information about upcoming webinars and conferences. Before we introduce today's guest speakers, I want to remind everyone that we're using the Zoom webinar platform. So please drop your questions in the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Olivier Henry Biabou and Jennifer Griswold. Olivier is the CEO of TCI Research and TravelSat, a Brussels-based travel data intelligence agency endorsed by the UNWTO and trusted by 100+ destinations globally. His company specializes in destination competitive analysis and has set international standard methodologies measuring visitor satisfaction, destination reputation, and visitor sentiment. He is also president of the TTRA Europe chapter and would love to see you in April of 2023 in France for the next TTRA Europe conference. Jennifer is a client success lead at Rove. Before Rove, Jennifer was a state researcher for 10 years across 3 states. She's serving her second term on the TTRA International Board of Directors. Today, Jennifer will bring insights into how destinations can utilize visitors' experience data to make better place-making decisions. Thank you, Olivier and Jennifer.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay, we can start. It's an absolute pleasure for me to team up today with our partner Rove Marketing, so to share with you the latest insights, the latest research innovations when it comes to measure the visitor satisfactions. I'm going to share my screen. So let me know if everything is okay. Jennifer, can you confirm?
Yes, sorry. We can see the PowerPoint. If you want to change it to presentation mode.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, then I need to move that bar somewhere and go into the presenter mode. Right. So the reason why we actually chose that topic together with Rove is actually it should be a no-brainer, right? Measuring visitor sentiment, visitor satisfaction is something that basically any DMO should do in the world. I think in Europe, probably 80–90% of DMOs are kind of tracking or measuring the visitor satisfaction. I'm not sure about US, but anyways, this is more essential than ever. And one of the reasons is probably because today we are living a little bit of a weird situation on our sector. It is probably the first time in research history that we measure such a gap between travel desire and travel complexity. So no doubt, people travel again, they're back on travel. If not today, they will do tomorrow. And so that desire is actually a number of obstacles in terms of destination planning, in terms of experience. And so we measure at the same time a huge increase in arrivals, but also huge drop down and decline in the overall sector reputation. And you know exactly why. We are kind of looking into that pandemic again, geopolitics, inflation, the airport chaos, all the tourism is back, the labor shortage. So there are so many reasons why new visitors coming back on travel have maybe some chances to be disappointed by their first experience post-COVID. So that situation is putting a lot of pressure on DMO shoulders to deliver basically what post-COVID visitors are expecting. And we know that the inflation is adding another layer of pressure on the value for money perception. So it may not be a problem to be expensive, and especially today in inflation context, as soon as you are able to deliver the value that people are expecting for the money they spend. And on top of that, we know that the profile of visitors today, whereas they look for pretty much the same as pre-COVID, right? The myth of the completely new normal is a completely bullshit to me. But what we see is the revenge tourists of higher level of expectations, and they also have lower tolerance limits. So this puts a huge urgency and need for destinations to be able to increase the visitor satisfaction and to make better than the competition, so to protect their kind of brand equity or reputation. And obviously, because happy people tend to spend more, it's the best way to increase the spend at destination. So the question of measuring the satisfaction is actually, you can do that in different ways. If we look at the two big ways, or the two most popular ways we do at TCI and through Rove as well, is two ways. One is the conventional survey, right? The survey based, the classic exit survey. So you ask your visitors if they were satisfied, you ask them to rate different aspects of the visits and so on. And this can be completed in a very great way by rating and reviews data, and that part will be actually the focus for today. Coming back on the survey, there's nothing rocket science, right? And everybody can do a survey. And this is a bit of a luxury today to be able to ask the question you want to the people you want. So what you can do as well is just using some sort of standard, such as the TravelSat standard, which has been endorsed by UNWTO and used so far by 100+ destinations. So you use the same questions, and doing this, you have a chance to be able to benchmark versus norms, such as for the Net Promoter Score, for 60 different indicators covering the full destination experience. The fact able to use that standard will allow you to be able to compare. And it's relatively turnkey kind of implementation. Now, the rating and reviews is adding a lot of opportunities, actually, and this is why we wanted to deep dive into that. It gives a lot of granularity in terms of looking at the satisfaction on very specific tourism experiences from your ecosystem. Granularities in terms of geography, so you can get the destination analytics, the vertical analytics, and if you like, looking at the next museum or hotels next to your doors. And so that kind of granularity and real-time efficiency and cost effectiveness is really putting rating and reviews data as some sort of a must-have today for destinations, as a great way to complement, sometimes to substitute, the conventional survey data. So now focusing on rating reviews, TravelSat, which is called the Travel Pulse data, is actually looking at everything which is shared spontaneously by visitors, guests in hotels, attractions, shopping places, transportation. So it's really in a holistic monitoring of the tourism ecosystem. It basically scrapped the data from 35+, now nearly 40 different rating platforms that everybody knows, TripAdvisor, Google reviews, Facebook reviews, and so on. And the thing is, through this kind of data, and we may call it big data, but whatever the name we put it, it's the same. It helps accessing also comparability and compare the performance against any type of competitors worldwide, and it could be your next neighbor destination as well as regional norms or global norms. And these data not only measure the numerical scoring that you may get from all these platforms, consolidated and uniformized, but also looking at the sentiment, meaning people commenting in reviews about their opinions, what they like, what they dislike, and there's an automation of through natural language processing, which is looking at the polarity and the frequency of different opinions based on the ratings. So most importantly, I will focus on examples of destinations, how they use it, and what is it really used for. I mean, basically, it's interesting because we see there a move, especially in Europe, from destination marketing organizations towards destination marketing and management organizations. And this type of data is definitely a kind of a backbone for both the marketing aspects and the management and stewardship aspect. It's the best friend, so to speak, of those destinations who would like to engage a bit more into industry relationship, into encouraging the private sectors in performing better than before and better than competitors. So it's all about sharing the data to the boards, to association, to align the marketing messages to the performance, to be able to map, okay, which are my competitive DNA in delivering the right experience to my visitors. There are also great ways, and we have a little bit of secret sauce around that, but to combine data from rating reviews plus mobile location data from Near, for example, or other sources of data to create a great story about, you know, the competitiveness of the destination. Scorecard, destination itineraries development, and everything around you know, the strategic planning from day-to-day monitoring for those who are most engaged in destination management. So a few case studies very briefly, and if you want to know more, just feel free to interact with us to get a bit more of details. I just, you know, spotting 3 examples of 3 destinations, 2 in Europe, one which is nearly European because it's administered by Holland, and the Netherlands is Aruba, as you know, in the Caribbean, and they are all using the data in different ways, mix of strategic planning or industry relationship, of course, competitive benchmarking, and some other are also using the data for quality monitoring purposes and tourism product development. Starting with France. Actually, France was one of our first clients like 10 years ago when we started developing that standard solution just before it was endorsed by UNWTO. France is very much looking, you know, it's a #1 destination, but it doesn't mean necessarily you are the best destination in terms of satisfaction. And they knew that. So we measured that. And so years after years, they managed to slowly but surely make the gap between their score and the competitive score. And one of the reasons why they're succeeding quite well in improving the visitor satisfaction over the years is because, well, there are plenty of things, but one of the impact factors is because they have created a special network of best performers, so kind of attractions, hotels and restaurants which really delivers unique experiences. And so yes, they use the data to communicate with the private sector, to identify the hidden gems from the data, and also to measure the impact of this network, which is a kind of label, the Qualité Tourisme, so let's say quality tourism label. We measure every year that this label has a great impact on the visitor satisfaction level. And so, for example, here, it's in French, but it's a French case study. We see that the ratings for restaurants who are members of this special quality certification compared to the average tend to absolutely overperform for the room perception or the surrounding, the staff hospitality, the food quality, the value for money. And so it's a great data-based community management that they're using through the data on top of just monitoring key trends year after year. And so they are able to promote the best performers locally. And so people go more to those places. So they are more happy with the verticals overall. They are more happy with the region. And so France is benefiting from that. So it's a great way to tighten the relationship between the national tourism organizations and local tourism organizations, but also to tighten the relationship between the public and the private sector, which usually is the factor of success for competitive destinations. Aruba do a bit of the same, but they really look at the data every day. So what they do is, you're looking at the dashboard. We help them with analyzing the different topics. And for example, when they want to deep dive into the food experience, we realized some years ago from a survey, the TravelSat survey, that they were overperforming the Caribbean satisfaction levels for quality overall, diversity of food, and the staff hospitality. But they tend to have a little bit of pressure for the value for money, especially compared to Mexico. So what they did with us is looking at, okay, we need to deep dive into that, understand which subcategories of food is overperforming, underperforming, better than average competition, lower. Is it more the quick bites or the fine dining or whatever, farm to table visits, or you name it? And so we understand from the rating and review is something that we cannot really track from the survey, which is where are the best performers located and the lower performers located. What is driving really the sentiment around positive and negative opinions around the food experience in Aruba. And doing this, the outcome of that was a great webinars gathering all the community of restaurants and food experience operators, just to give back all that information and encourage the whole industry to improve. And I can tell you, each time you talk about rating and reviews for an operator, obviously they know what it means because this is their reputation. And the last example is about Vienna. As you know, Vienna is a very large and very mature and very popular city in Europe, and they are really acting in a very, very brutal competitive space of city breaks. That's kind of a huge segment in Europe, and there are many, many great cities, by the way, which are competing together. So Vienna is looking at the data with us, not necessarily to monitoring that on a daily basis, but what they want is a deep dive. And this is just a few snapshots from a very large report that we provided them very recently. And basically what we use from the rating and reviews data, as opposed to the travel stats survey we also do for them, is the granularity of the information in relation to, okay, we know the city is overperforming compared to the average. We have, by the way, slightly changed the data, but the story more or less is the same. So they overperform overall, but then it's interesting to deep dive into, okay, what are the type of accommodations which are really underperforming, overperforming? We talk about the food in Vienna, it's great, but what kind of categories are really underperforming, overperforming? And above all, comparing the scores with the benchmark, which is based on the group of competitive cities in Europe. And through this kind of radar, they can immediately understand where they overperform versus competition and where they underperform. So let's say we find again this year that they clearly have kind of competitive DNAs in relation to the museums, theaters, churches and monuments, but maybe they will have to do something to encourage, to create in terms of marketing, in terms of offering more and better attractions around tours and guides, shoppings, and let's say entertainment and sports. It's just example, right? But the interest there again is to highlight where the city is competitive and not competitive, because this is a hugely competitive market. Now, coming in terms, looking at some key trends, and we could actually do 10 days of presentation about the key trends, but just going into some high level numbers. Also, other way to say it's high time for all DMOs to look into this kind of data, because unfortunately what we're currently measuring, and it's kind of a global trend, is the new visitors coming back post-COVID, and all these impatient and revenge visitors. They tend to have a lot of expectations, and unfortunately, when they are back to travel, the level of ratings we measure today as opposed to or compared to pre-COVID, same period. So year to date, 2022, same period pre-COVID in 2019, we're seeing a little bit of decrease, right? And this is based on virtually millions of rating and reviews. So one drop of 0.1 out of 10 means a lot of things. And this little, alert on the visitor experience is something we see at global level, we see at European level. It's also something we measure at US level. And deep diving a bit more into some verticals, it seems like the travel frictions and some of the elements kind of penalizing the overall rating for the destination may come more from the lodging sector compared to attractions. Actually, attractions still have high level of ratings overall, and very similar to pre-COVID. It's been kind of a huge, a lot of possibilities when people are coming back to travel to self-indulge and to have very quick wins along the visitor journey with limited travel efficiency. There's a little bit of over-tourism and overcrowding in some key attractions, but overall, we see a lot of stability over there. Whereas in restaurants and above all in the lodging sector, we've been measuring quite a lot of opinions and ratings around travel friction that you can imagine, such as I don't want to see the kids of that family putting the fingers on the buffet, or people like fighting together to go to the swimming pool and put their towels on the chair because the chair reservation system was not operation, and whatever. So lodging is certainly a little bit more at risk right now, and they deserve support from the DMO to be able to make up the somehow this little space of dissatisfaction. Obviously, and fortunately, it's not the case for 100% of destinations that we see this decline. There are many destinations who are actually quite good in this period of travel resumption. Mentioning 2 clients of us, and we are lucky to have clients performing well. So maybe it's because they're using the data, and maybe not. But at the end of the day, in a context like a decline of satisfaction in Europe, a city like Vienna managed to not only overperform European average, but also they increased the level of satisfaction compared to pre-COVID. Same for Aruba. This destination is constantly looking for quality. And in terms of inflation context right now, it's really challenged. So they focus a lot on that, and they manage actually to perform better than pre-COVID and perform way better than the average competition. So just to summarize, the one of the key difference between, if we look at methods, right? Because I know many attendees may be researchers, and it's interesting to look at the pros and cons, and because there is no ideal methods. But one key difference between the rating and reviews data and satisfaction data you may get from a survey is actually the little, let's say, the short questionnaire, because somehow a reviews is someone putting a score and some sort of a short open end, like a comments. It's nothing less than an open end. The main difference is this comment is going to be seen by potentially thousands of potential travelers to your destination. So it means it is already shaping the reputation. It's already changing the potential attractiveness of destination. So if you start from a very, let's say, a single Google reviews, and that's again the case for somebody who's kind of advocating a great hotel on Aruba, it's just one review. But if you multiply by thousands of reviews for the same hotels, then, and if they are going, in the right direction, and if they are positive, you then increase the satisfaction for that particular hotel. And if you're in the destination, you manage to have more hotels attracting more and better reviews, then you will increase the vertical performances for hotels overall. And you see, and that's real data, Aruba is overperforming the Caribbean average quite significantly. And if your hotels are rated better than the competition, that would increase the destination performance overall. And at the end of the day, indeed, Aruba is one of the best competitors in the region. And if you do that, basically what they know, and this is why they invest in this kind of data, because it creates a better reputation, better experience. Happy visitors today will recruit new visitors tomorrow from word of mouth. It's usually 40% of first-time visitors who choose a destination based on friends and relatives' recommendations. More loyalty and higher spend, because obviously if you are more satisfied, you spend more at destination. So before leaving the floor to Jennifer to see a little bit more the data in action, there are actually lots of key learning we learned from all these competitive analyses we do from rating and reviews, and I'm just mentioning a few of them on the deck so you will be able to read by yourself. But there are many interesting aspects that you can learn from basically looking at the data, looking at reviews, understanding how the sentiment is driven by, in positive and negative. So it could be, adding more, if you are a DMO attending now, making sure you tick the box in terms of, having hotels, showing extra visible efforts in renovation. Of course, in terms of hygiene and housekeeping, COVID is never far away in consumer mind. Looking in a kind of activating or making a lot of efforts throughout the private sectors in terms of offering more hedonistic experiences, sensorial experiences, including a lot of foodies moment, because this is very much impacting the destination rating, in a positive way. The food moment is kind of a real seller today. Lots of active sport options. The concept of sense of place is even more important than before because of the COVID and all these, lockdowns and frustrations and everything. And of course, hybriding, which is a great way for one visitor to spend money for one attraction, but if through the attraction, they can also touch a little bit of culture, sport, and nature, they will rate the attraction very high and they will be more satisfied. They will recruit new visitors for you. They will improve your reputation, etc., etc. So many different things you can learn from that. And so it's time for me to leave the floor to you, Jen. I'm sliding that for you if you like before going to the demo. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Olivier. Thanks everybody for attending today. And, Olivier gave a lot of case studies and examples of how destinations are using this information. So I want to go through a little bit of a demo with everyone and go through 4 examples with you. But before we do that, I actually need to talk you through some terms that we use in the platform. And I also wanted to let you know that the platform is the demo that I'm going to show you today is the standard platform that the TravelStat Pulse, the ratings and review data lives on, but there is full API access and it's accessible through Domo and other technology solutions as well. So back to the key terms to know. We have 5 here, and I know it looks like a lot of text, and I'm going to walk you through it, so it shouldn't be too bad. So the overall rating is overall for the technology that we use when the data comes into the platform. Everybody has different review mechanisms. So what we do is we standardize the review mechanisms, whether it's stars on 1 through 5 scale, 1 through 10 scale, to a 10-point numeric scale to standardize the overall rating of the different properties. So that's what the overall rating is. And the sentiment rating actually provides the key insights into the review sentiment. So the text box, that's where the natural language processing is. And so we look at specific various topics about the property's visit and how those words and the tonality exist together to have an indexed score of 0 to 10, balancing where 0 is a negative balance score. So it's like negative tonality. They're saying bad things about that destination or that specific property, or just negative things in general. 4 to 5 and 6, those are pretty neutral responses. So in aggregate, like most people are seeing positives and negatives. And then anywhere upwards of that to a 10 is a very positive balance. So they have nothing but like shining bright things to say about this specific property. The TES score attempts to take those two, the overall rating and the sentiment, and put them together in a combination for an overall, to like capture overall the essence of the rating and combine the rating score and the sentiment, which may not necessarily correlate exactly. So you can figure out where the issues are. The PP score is the pandemic precaution score, and that's based on keywords around pandemic safety. And it's scored similar to sentiment. And the SS score is the sanitary safety score, and that's based on overall hygiene and cleanliness of the property. It can include visitor perceptions based on cleanliness, humidity, odor, smell, pests, dust, etc. So the next slide is a breakdown of all of the different sentiment analysis categories that we have. So there are 7 categories. We've got facilities, cleanliness, location, service, value, food, beverage, and ambiance. And then those are broken out into further sub-ratings. And that's what our natural language processing focuses on. In the future, Olivier, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's going to be a sustainability measure in the dashboard as well, right?
That's correct, and it's already actually live.
Oh, great!
Like
then I need to update my slide.
It's just very new. It's just very new.
So we're going to kick over to the demo now, and I'm going to show you some examples of the destination dashboard. So the first one that we're looking at here, this is the dashboard, and we're looking at a specific vertical. There's different ways to filter the information by date range. Vertical, so we have attraction, accommodations, and restaurants in this platform. This particular demoed account that we're looking at is a cross-section of US states, and it's all real live data. It's about 20% from each state, and it's just kind of a cross-section of several states across the US. And then you can look at it by different categories. We have a lot of variety here. There's all kinds of different categories of attractions and locations. We've got country, region, city, and groups. Groups are kind of cool because that allows you, the user, to set up specific groups that you want to look at. So if you wanted to set up your own benchmarks, or if you wanted to set up a grouping of specific states or cities, etc., things like that. So overall, on the green bars, we can see how many reviews we've received over time for all attractions in our cross-section of the United States. Then we can see that our overall rating is a 9.3, but our overall sentiment is a 9.0. We can see the change over time as well. And there's our tourism experience score and our total number of reviews, which is close to 500,500. We have a ratings comparison. And I know that some of these look like they're blanks, but that's okay because this is a breakout of the cleanliness facilities of 7 primary areas that we looked at earlier for the sentiment analysis. And not all of these areas are rated specifically, sometimes just on sentiment, there's not a cleanliness rating, so to speak, but there will be data in the review about the cleanliness. So I was really interested in how art museums perform over all attractions or compared to all attractions in the platform. So I wanted to look at a cross-section of that, and that's what I'm showing you right here. We're looking just at art museums over all of the attractions. And so we could see that we have almost 7,000 art museum reviews in the data, and the overall sentiment is 9.3, but how does it compare to each other? We have a little bit of a better rating right here compared to our benchmark, which is all attractions. Our art museums are at 9.3, but all attractions are at 9.0. And we can see that we're overperforming in some specific areas, these two in particular, the value and the location. And we're underperforming a little bit on service and ambiance. We can dive down deeper into the subrating information and figure out what exactly is happening in our comparison group here. So we can see that we are definitely overperforming in value for money and the surrounding area, but we're a little bit underperforming in this one right here, the personnel. And so we can see some specific examples. We could dive further too into this platform if we had specific areas that we were looking at in terms of like, what about the personnel? We can see different information and input on that. So that's my first example about art museums. I want to kick it over to accommodations. And so for this example, for my accommodations example, I wanted to compare Hawaii to California. Now, usually I don't think Hawaii does compare itself to California too frequently. And as a user, Hawaii could go in and set up a group to where they're looking specifically at tropical destinations or island destinations or a combination thereof. So the overall sentiment for Hawaii is 8.3, and we've got over 180,000 different reviews, number of mentions. We can see that comparatively, the overall rating is higher than our benchmark rating, which is the state of California. We're at 8.3 over 8.1. And the facilities rating is also ranked very high. And in both areas, we're seeing a little bit of a more neutral score in the 6 and 5 range for value and ambiance. But in comparison, Hawaii is doing a little bit better in terms of value than California in this particular instance. You can also scroll down and see what are the areas that maybe we need to work on in our competitive set. And in this particular example over this time frame, we've got pandemic precautions is kind of orange, and so that's kind of negative. And what that tells me is that the people who are writing reviews about the pandemic are not very pleased with the outlook at the different accommodations in Hawaii. So that's good insights to know. It's kind of a low sample size. We're looking at the beginning of the year until September 30th. And so we also are aware of like the context of what's happening, and pandemic precautions has become less of an issue over time as the world moves to a less pandemic state. So that's my accommodations example. And I wanted to show you also a very specific example for how a state destination could use this information. And so what I wanted to look at was restaurants in Central Oregon compared to restaurants across all of Oregon. Again, we can see that our overall sentiment is 9.2, and our number of mentions, and this is just for Central Oregon, is almost 5,000. We're comparing, comparatively speaking, our overall rating is slightly higher, which is amazing for Central Oregon. And we can see that we're overperforming in a couple of different areas, like food and beverages, facilities, service, and even the value is significantly higher than for the rest of Oregon. Some areas that we need to think about potentially working on are the location and the cleanliness, but they are still neutral ratings overall. So it's not a negative or a bad feeling that people have in the specific area. We're just underperforming compared to the entire state. We can dive in even deeper and see what is Central Oregon doing really well. They're doing really well in atmosphere, but so is the rest of Oregon, but that's great. And we're significantly overperforming for value for money. So when we looked at value, we were overperforming. Diving in a little deeper, we see that the value for money is where we're really excelling for our reviewers. We see that there's also some areas that have really low sample size, but again, we need to think about in terms of what this data set is. It's not survey data, it's review data, and this review data is the people responding to their experiences in a specific destination. And even though these are low sample sizes or low review counts, they're still publicly available. And so people can see this information and make decisions on it. So it's really important to figure out ways to address these types of this type of information. Another thing that I wanted to show everybody is that we do have some information about the composition of the different reviews, where the reviews are coming from. So we can see specifically, and this is a subset of all of the data. It's not going to add up to the same numbers as these up here, because not all review sites have the composition or the travel type for the reviewers. But we can see that primarily we're getting a lot of information from couples and then families, and less so from visiting with or traveling with friends or business travel. But we can see consistently they are rating everything very high, so that's good news. We also have different reviewer country, which is a really good indicator of the combination of reviewer country and the reviewer language. It's a really good data set to look at and see, like, how do the Spanish-speaking countries feel about my destination? Do I need to have restaurants that are in Spanish, or do I need to have restaurants in French? Or, you know, what are my what is my reviewers group native language, and how can I best appeal to them? We also have different sources, so we can see where the reviews are specifically coming from. So if we wanted to boost up our TripAdvisor score, we know that that's our second, but we want it to be first. We can put in, we can share ideas with our partners that, hey, you should have a little QR code that's set up so that people can easily review your attraction, your restaurant, your hotel on TripAdvisor or Google reviews or things like that. Now, I didn't get into a lot of specifics on the individual performance of specific properties in the area, but I did want to show that that is available. We do have very specific information. And again, this is just a cross section. So we're looking specifically at a lot of attractions right here. And we can see like what the rating is, what the sentiment rating is, what the scores are, And we can compare specific groups. So if you are a destination, if you are a city, or you are a locality, municipality, or an entire state, you can actually see how specific areas are stacking up. Who are your hidden gems? Who needs a little extra attention? Things like that. So that is the demo, and I do see that we do have some questions.
There is actually one question, which is a great one, I think, not only because it's the only one, but also because it's a great one. Somebody asking about, can we share some examples of a destination actually turning the data into policy making and action, and if there are any challenges about that. What I can really safely say for sure is that, and that's really based on like 10 years of visitor satisfaction measurement for, I mean, really 100 of different destinations. The thing which we feel, that's the feedback we get from clients, is this kind of data is giving a lot of power for the DMO to do a database evidence policymaking. So talking to the big, guys like the Taxi Federation, the hospitality sector. So there is a nice way of giving or getting a bit more power in discussing with those different stakeholders, and somehow encouraging the whole industry to do better and to do better than the competition. And believe me, when they show data and they say this comes from an independent research solutions endorsed by WTO, telling that we're doing great for this, but we're underperforming for that, this is very, very impactful for the stakeholders. Sometimes they don't like it. Sometimes they realize that they need to do something. And the case for France is fascinating for that, because we started with a very bad news at the beginning when we first did the first, assessment of the France satisfaction, because somehow they all were thinking, oh, we're number one. Yeah, we're number one. So we don't need to take care much about the satisfaction. I'm exaggerating a little bit. But then they realized that, for example, from the data, the satisfaction level for the shopping was not that high in terms of particularly the opening hours. So they decided to move into a policy making, so to enlarge the opening hours and days for international visitors. And years after years, we have seen some good progress, not everywhere, but on many aspects in terms of visitor satisfaction. Well, we have actually lots of examples. As we speak, for example, Catalonia is creating a new itineraries. They call it the Fly and Drive Grand Tour. So we help them through the data to identify what would be an ideal tour for people arriving and landing at Barcelona, renting a car, and what's the best to see outside of Barcelona. And so we use the data for creating that product and new experiences for the destination. It's not really policy making, it's more like marketing and offering making, but that helps a lot. And same, for example, for Luxembourg, as we speak, they use the data, we analyze the data for them, so to not only monitor month after month how they perform versus Europe and main competition and so on, but also they will use this the same data to identify which operators requires some funding, extra funding, so they are at the level that they should be, and not continuing, putting the reputation of Luxembourg at risk. So it's kind of real policy making in terms of financing the sector, using the data in that direction. Oslo, for example, as we speak, is using the data to create a new complete sustainability or sustainable policy, sustainable initiative. I'm not going too much into detail, but we have also used that kind of data to understand, how they perform in terms of delivering sustainable experience to the visitors, knowing that they are surrounded by a lot of great players such as Copenhagen, Stockholm, etc. So the diversity of application from the data is kind of unlimited, and it's really a mix of destination marketing and management, but definitely for destinations who are moving into the concept of stewardship and close industry management, this is really a fascinating data to play with, and giving that kind of power and impact that anyone would expect from research and data prospect as a DMO.
Olivier, do you want to address any questions about the differences between the numerical rating score and the sentiment overall score? Like, why are those different?
Sure. It's a bit, if we do a parallel with the survey, it's a bit like closed questions, like a rating from 1 to 10, and an open question. Or you've put 10. Can you explain why? Or you put 1. Can you explain why? So we use both. The only difference is we don't need anyone to code. It's made by, well, we need people to, and we work with a great technology for that. To look at the sentiment and what opinions is generated, is it positive or negative? But it's not like somebody manually looking at this opinion and they say, okay, this is positive, this is negative. So the difference is basically numerical is just based on all the data, all the score that visitors put on TripAdvisor or Google. So the scales are different. So we scale it and uniformize the scaling from, to get a 1 to 10. But this is a score we scrap from the source, which are numerical scores. That's the numerical score. And then the sentiment is more about, I know sentiment is a bit of a buzzword, but in this case it's super structured, I mean, there's no black box. It's a very, very obvious when you look at the opinions and the number of opinions and the ratings. So it's based on a sentiment analysis, so a semantic analysis, based on key concepts. So for example, someone commenting on the personal or staff in a positive way, that would go in that lexicon. Someone commenting about maybe crowd or waiting times, that will be part of the concept, fueling the overall sub ratings around sanitary safety or pandemic precaution. So it's a little bit of sophistication, but eventually the difference is more, the sentiment ratings will give more, let's say, ratings from the most engaged visitors. So those who took time not only to put a score, but also to put a comment attached to the score. And so somehow those who are mostly engaged with the destination, and also obviously the one who are going to change possibly the reputation of that particular hotel, and so directly to the destination, because they comment on top of putting a score. And we estimate that about half of the rating reviews include some comments. Not all the sources are asking for that. You can put just a score and no comments, so it all depends.
Olivier, that's a great lead in to this next question about review, like management of all of that. So this question is, unlike a random survey, review data is highly susceptible to a propensity for bimodal distribution. Highly satisfied or highly dissatisfied or highly satisfied customers are the most likely to post a review, and those in the middle least likely. How can we understand the data in light of this?
Yeah,
also,
sure.
Many platforms like Airbnb hosts encourage respondents to provide 5 out of 5 stars and positive reviews, and provide anything negative in private comment. Then how can we also believe the representativeness of the reviews? Well, Olivier, I want to definitely kick this off to you, but I do want to say that this is a little bit of like insight into reputation management, and it is a good way to start engaging your destination and the people that live in your destination, the properties, the small business owners, and say, hey, if you post a sign about your destination to review it, a lot of people will just do that because you ask them nicely. And that is a marketing trick that a lot of small businesses don't know, but if you just ask your people who had a pleasant experience, they'll go ahead and, like, even if it's a neutral experience, they'll go ahead and post a review and they'll say, yeah, it was fine, or nice, things like that. And then in terms of the representativeness of the reviews, I do want to point out that whenever I go buy products, and a lot of people I know buy products, they go and they do read the reviews. So they may not necessarily be completely representative of the middle, but we get a lot of great information out of that, and we understand what our challenges are, and we understand what our positives are when we read the reviews about our destination or specific products. Go ahead, Olivier.
Yeah, I mean, you pointed out a lot of very valid points, and just adding a little bit on the question of quality, which is essential when you measure something, and assuming that there's absolutely, even in the survey, you can never be absolutely guaranteed that there's not like 0.5 of interviews that people telling just whatever they want, and it's not really controlled. So, but at the end of the day, and this is why it's quite important to combine, if you can, as a DMO, if you can afford that, to do both the survey and the reviews. The survey will definitely give you a representative overview and yes, performance indicators based on representative visitors, and you have many ways to weight the data according to your visitation profile and so on. So you need that to somehow set the scene about your competitiveness on indicators that you can track from a survey and indicators that cannot be tracked from rating and reviews anyways. Having said that, and the more we work with the reviews data, the more we realize that obviously we all know that there are fake reviews somewhere, that it's impossible to control, it's impossible to curate that. But the more we look at that, the more we see that whereas it could be a problem when you look at one particular attraction or property that play the bad role of only looking at the kind of maybe sometimes competing on their own some fake reviews and everything. But when you consolidate at the destination level, thousands, hundreds of thousands of reviews, and the ecosystem connected is diversified enough, because we didn't mention that, but when we work with the client, we define together the ecosystem they want to track. So we do it either randomly with them, or we select, and we never select the kind of properties that would be biased at the end, because they won't usually they do it to have the reality of the quality of their destination and products. So it's impossible to curate the bad review, the wrong or let's say cheated reviews, but the mass of data we have is actually somehow giving a very good, let's say, representativeness, especially when you deep dive into subcategories and so on. Basically, we also used, for example, the profile of reviewers that you may want to compare with the visitation as a proxy of a visitation rebound. So, for example, it is, I don't know, for Aruba, maybe attract 80% of US visitors. In the review and ratings, we have 80% of the reviewers from that country. So it never match. And it's very important to know about the limitation, but at some point, whereas the rating reviews cannot replace a representative picture of the visitor satisfaction, that will create many, many more opportunities of deep dive to special categories. And because it's based on thousands of reviews, the bias you may have is kind of mitigated, or at least you can control that in a way that, okay, if there is only 8 reviews on one particular subcategories, then you cannot say anything about that. But then you have like 3,000 reviews on your hotels in your destination in the past week or in the past months. It really means something. And over time, as always, when you have a bias, it's the same for all destinations, and somehow it's the same for over time. So you can also look at the dynamic and making impact assessment like we do for some destinations, for example.
Olivier, do you want to? Sustainability is a huge topic of discussion right now. And so one of the questions that we have is, what role does sustainability play in the product development of a DMO? And I'm assuming that this means in regard to rating and review data. So what kind of sub-rating information, how are we going to use that information? Those are the kinds of questions that we're looking for here.
Yeah, that's such an important point, especially in Europe, is I think really kind of advanced on that specific issues compared to maybe to the US. The US have many other sectors and topics where you guys are more advanced to Europe, but on sustainability, it's very interesting to look at Europe. And indeed, well, there are many questions in the question, but First of all, on the practical way, through the data, as well as through surveys, but through the data, reviews and rating data, you can have also a feeling about or good scores and a way to monitor the sustainable travel. Actually, the new score that is currently more than beta tested because it's live, just new, is looking at both people commenting on eco-friendliness, for example, of the hotel, or providing comments around the fact that the hotel is paying a lot of efforts for protecting the environment. They're also looking at how far this attraction is giving back to the community, or if it's providing a social impact that is good, in a sense that if, for example, you have problems of flow or influx management, or it's overcrowding, and then you're going to have a bad impact on the community. So this is a little bit of sophistication. It's usually something easier to track direct in the survey, but the rating and reviews data can do that. And it's exactly what you were saying. One of the key factor of success of destinations in terms of overall quality experience are the one engaging into quality, and quality is the basic, fundamental, basic stuff you need to have as a destination, because it's part of the sustainability, because it means you take care about the quality of things, and it's good for the visitors. It's usually good also for the residents. That's one thing. And when we look at the drivers of satisfaction, so comparing attractions or destinations having better ratings compared to others, usually the concept around sustainability is never far away, because you see things around, again, eco-friendliness, environment, hygiene, social impact. And so indeed, this is one of the key factors to monitor. And this is why with the technology partner, we try to always look at what is on the rise in terms of DMO aspect. And Oslo, for example, or Copenhagen is definitely using this kind of data to connect and looking at the sentiment, as well as they monitor the operators they know provide specific efforts in terms of sustainability. So we can compare hotel engaged in sustainability versus average hotel, and just by chance what you see is an enormous gap in positive for those who are providing higher efforts in terms of sustainability. And you may not believe it, but those properties may not be the cheapest one. So as soon as they engage into that, they may be able to justify a slightly increase in prices. And everybody knows what it means in inflation context today.
Awesome. Well, we don't want to keep you guys over too much longer. We appreciate your time today, so thank you so much. If you did not get your questions answered, feel free to reach out directly to Olivier or myself, and we would be happy to address any additional questions you have. Maybe you would like to see more information about this and you'd like to understand how we can help with your destination. Also feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.